In this documentary, you will get to watch Mount Sodom, which got perished by a storm of brimstone rain. Then, while traveling along the Dead Sea, we will go to the ruins of Masada. This castle was built by a Jewish king, Herod the Great. I will also take you to his castles and gravesite located in Bethlehem. Then we will stop by at the caves of Qumran, where recently, Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. In Jerusalem, I will take you to various historically important places like the Wailing Wall and Masjid al-Aqsa. I will also take you to the Church of Nativity, birthplace of Prophet Jesus. Then, we will travel up north to see Nazareth, and the Sea of Galilee, where Prophet Jesus grew up and performed several miracles. Along the way, I will show you the grave sites of 8 prophets: Prophet Moses, Prophet Lot, Prophet Jethro, Prophet David, Prophet Abraham, Prophet Isaac, Prophet Jacob, and Prophet Yusuf, alayhis salam. I will also take you to the gravesite of Bilal Habashi, and house of Salman Farsi, important companions of Prophet Muhammad, alayhis salam. Mount Sodom is approximately 7 miles long, 3 miles wide, 742 feet above the Dead Sea water level, yet 557 feet below sea level. Since the surface soil is made up of more than 95% salt, no plant can grow on the mountain. This creates a moon-like landscape. I started my hike, and at times, I was walking alongside vertical walls of pure halite. Until a decade ago, a number of spectacular caves were open to the public, but the salt is quick and easy to collapse, such that following a few minor events of rock collapse, the caves were closed to visitors for safety reasons. The Bible indicates that there were more than just the 2 cities of Sodom and Gomorrah that were destroyed. Archaeologists, with the help of satellite mapping, located 3 other cities in the area that were destroyed by the same blast. They were identified as Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar, which is also known as Bela. These cities, with the exception of Zoar, were not small, they were large with populations in the thousands. The Prophet Lut alayhis salam lived at the same time as the Prophet Ibrahim alayhis salam, and was sent as a messenger to a neighboring tribe. That tribe, according to the Quran, practiced homosexuality. When the Prophet Lut alayhis salam told the people to abandon this sin, they denied that he was a prophet, and continued with their lifestyle. As a result, the tribe was destroyed in a terrible disaster by Allah. Holy Book of Quran described the events in various chapters. Here they are.
And we had sent Lot when he said to his people, "Do you commit such immorality as no one has preceded you with from among the worlds? Indeed, you approach men with desire instead of women. Rather, you are a transgressing people. Indeed, we will bring down on the people of this city punishment from the sky, because they have been defiantly disobedient. And we have certainly left of it a sign as clear evidence for a people who use reason."
The doings of his people saddened Lot's heart. Their unwholesome reputation spread throughout the land, while he struggled against them. As the years passed, he persisted in his mission, but to no avail. If home is the place of comfort and rest, then Lot found none, for he was tormented both inside and outside his home. His life was continuous torture, and he suffered greatly, but he remained patient and steadfast with his people. The years rolled by, and still no one believed in him. Instead, they belittled his message, and mockingly challenged him.
Bring us the punishment of Allah, if you should be of the truthful.
Overwhelmed with despair, Lot prayed to Allah, to grant him victory, and destroy the corrupt. Therefore, 3 angels were sent to the town of Sodom. The first person who caught sight of them was Lot's daughter, who was filling her jug from a river. She was stunned that there could be men of such magnificent beauty on earth. One of the young men asked her for a place to rest. She replied, "Stay here, and do not enter the town, until I inform my father and return." She returned home, and told her father about these young men. Lot felt distressed as he quickly ran to his guests. He asked them where they have come from, and where they were going. They did not answer his questions. Instead, they asked if he could host them. Lot, in vain, tried to make them understand the perilous situation. Then, he requested them to wait until the night fell, for then no one would see them. In the night, Lot escorted his guest to his home. Unfortunately, his wife sent the news out that 3 young beautiful men are in her house, and the news spread to all the inhabitants like wildfire. The mob approached his house, and started banging the door. Lot pleaded with them to leave the visitors alone, and fear Allah's punishment. Lot's people waited until he had finished his short sermon, and then they roared with laughter. Blinded by passion, they broke down the door. Lot was unable to prevent the abuse of his guests, but he firmly stood his ground, and continued to plead with the mob. Seeing him in a state of helplessness and grief, the guests said, "Do not be anxious or frightened, Lot, for we are angels, and these people will not harm you." On hearing this, the mob was terrified, and fled from Lot's house, hurling threats at him as they left. The angels warned Prophet Lot to leave his house before sunrise, taking with him all his family, and not to look back. Allah had decreed that the city of Sodom should perish. A storm of brimstone rained on the city. Everyone and everything was destroyed. When Lot's wife looked back, she became a pillar of salt. It is said that this pillar is actually Lot's wife. Allah the Almighty recounted this story in Al-Quran.
They said, "Indeed, we have been sent to a people of criminals. Except the family of Lot, indeed we will save them all. Except his wife, Allah decreed that she is of those who remain behind." And when the messengers came to the family of Lot, he said, "Indeed, you are people unknown." They said, "But we have come to you with that about which they were disputing, and we have come to you with truth, and indeed we are truthful. So set out with your family during a portion of the night, and follow behind them, and let not anyone among you look back, and continue on to where you are commanded." And we conveyed to him the decree of that matter, that those sinners would be eliminated by early morning. And the people of the city came rejoicing. Lot said, "Indeed, these are my guests, so do not shame me. And fear Allah, and do not disgrace me." They said, "Have we not forbidden you from protecting people?" Lot said, "These are my daughters, if you would be doers of lawful marriage." By your life, O Muhammad, indeed they were, in their intoxication, wandering blindly. So the shriek seized them at sunrise. And we made the highest part of the city its lowest, and rained upon them stones of hard clay. Indeed, in that are signs for those who discern. And indeed, those cities are situated on an established road. Indeed, in that is a sign for the believers. So we saved him and his family, all, except an old woman among those who remained behind. Then we destroyed the others, and we rained upon them a rain of stones, and evil was the rain of those who were warned. Indeed, in that is a sign, but most of them were not to be believers. And indeed, your Lord, He is the exalted in might, the merciful.
These cities were built largely of limestone, and when limestone is incinerated with sulfur, it produces calcium sulfate ash. Analysis of the remains at Sodom and Gomorrah reveals that it is very clean calcium sulfate, with virtually no trace elements. The fact that few trace elements remain is indicative of intense fierce heat, enough to break down entire limestone buildings and vaporize all other minerals. Volcanic activity does not produce this kind of clean ash. The brimstone from these sites is the pale white, monoclinic form. Sulfur changes to this form when exposed to high temperatures for an extended period of time, as would have been the case. X-ray fluorescence semicant analysis and other tests reveal the sulfur balls to be up to 98.4% pure sulfur, significantly more pure than naturally occurring sulfur. So far 5 cities that have been discovered were turned to ash and have sulfur balls strewn throughout them. The location of each of these was found by scrutinizing satellite maps of the area, locating geometric shapes, particularly square or rectangular areas. On 2 occasions, the investigation teams entered the cities after a rainfall. The glass surrounding the balls glistened in the light, the rain having exposed thousands of the balls. The balls themselves were composed of pressed pure powder sulfur. Checking with volcanic experts confirmed that nowhere else in the world, even around volcanic activity, were any balls of this composition found. When the balls had fallen from heaven, they were estimated to be around 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit. After consuming everything that was around them, the heat continues to melt the ash that had formed around them, vitrifying the ash. Thus, the balls were surrounded by a glassy casing of melted and ray-solidified ash. The brimstone is composed of 96 to 98% sulfur, with trace amounts of magnesium, which create an extremely high temperature burn. This is the only place on Earth where you can find 96% pure monoclinic sulfur in a round ball. This brimstone is not from any type of geothermal activity, as there is no evidence of such in the area. Geothermal sulfur nodules are only 40% pure sulfur, and are of the rhomboid type. Monoclinic, or prismatic sulfur, is obtained when liquid sulfur is cooled slowly, consists of long, needle-like crystals. It rains here about 2 to 3 times a year. During that time, it is easy to find brimstones that are mostly of golf ball size. I tried very hard, even dug into the unstable walls while hiking up, but I did not succeed. I am not an experienced hiker. I was alone, and with all the camera gear, I carried limited supply of water that only lasted halfway through, up the hike. Yet, I somehow managed to get on top of this mound. As I arrived at the summit, under the blazing sun, and 100 degrees Fahrenheit temperature, I started suffering from severe dehydration. I was the only one on the mount that day, and possibility of any help was non-existent. I quickly abandoned my further search at this cursed place, and ran for my life, towards the base, as fast as I could. I drank lots of fluids, salty chips, and sugary cookies, and that is when my uncontrollable cramps subsided. After a little rest, in whatever car air conditioner had to offer, I continued my journey. Nearby, it is said that this salt pillar is actually Lot's wife. I kept on looking at it with amazement. Then, it was time to move on. By the way, these kinds of salt pillars are common in this area, and, on my way to Jerusalem, I saw several of them. After leaving Mount Sodom, driving north on Highway 90, as I passed the Highway 31, on the left-hand side, I saw a dirt road that goes to Mitzad Zohar Fortress. Even though a four-wheeler was needed, I took a chance, and drove over half a mile in my small car. The ruins of Mitzad Zohar Fortress are built on top of a marl stone hill. Marl stone is about half limestone and half clay. The external walls that once surrounded the fortress have collapsed, and are gone. The ruins date to the Roman-Byzantine period, or possibly, to the Crusader Mamluk period. The fortress protected this ancient salt trade route. During those periods, salt was a precious commodity. The soldiers were also paid with sacks of salt. It is likely that the fortress was used to collect taxes from this trade. Although this entrance is open, a fence prevents the visitors to climb up the fragile tower. The Judean desert is very dry, and the builders of the fortress had to provide solutions in order to keep the soldiers alive. These measures included building cisterns and dams along the valley. A cistern is located on the foot of the tower. It collected the water from the dams and supplied the water to the fortress. A dam is located on the west side of the fortress. It collected the water in the stream during the few rainy days, creating a small lake. The Dead Sea is 42 miles long and 11 miles wide at its widest point. The Dead Sea is the lowest point on Earth. This is the world's lowest road. Highway 90 runs along the Israeli and West Bank shores of the Dead Sea, which is 1,289 feet below sea level. According to the Bible, the Dead Sea was a place of refuge for King David. The oceans contain 3.1% to 3.8% salt, of which 97% is sodium chloride. The Dead Sea contains about 33% salt, of which only about 15% is sodium chloride. The rest of the salt contains various mineral oxides, that makes its mud mineral rich. Various cultures and groups of people have visited the Dead Sea for therapy, dating back to the time of the ancient Egyptians, utilizing a bath with its gray-black mud. This high salinity makes the Dead Sea world famous for its buoyant properties as well. As soon as I got into the body of water, the high salt concentration hit my face, lips, and eyes. That made my stay in water temporary, and I got out of the water as fast as I could. The mud bath attracted blood-sucking flies, and I had to run for a shower. This salinity makes for a harsh environment in which animals cannot flourish, hence its name. The high salinity prevents macroscopic aquatic organisms such as fish and aquatic plants from living in it. This area used to be one of the world's first health resorts for Herod the Great, and it has been the supplier of a wide variety of products, from bombs for Egyptian mummification to potash for fertilizers. An unusual feature of the Dead Sea is its discharge of asphalt. From deep seats, the Dead Sea constantly spits up small pebbles and blocks of the black substance. Asphalt-coated figurines and bitumen-coated Neolithic skulls from archaeological sites have been found. Egyptian mummification processes used asphalt imported from the Dead Sea region. While driving to Jerusalem, stopping at the Masada is a thrilling and exciting experience. This fortress was built in the year 30 BC by King Herod. The cliffs on the eastern edge of Masada are about 400 meter high, and the cliffs on the west are about 91 meter high. The natural approaches to the cliff top are very difficult. Masada is situated on the top of this mountain with steep sides, and a flat top overlooking the desert panorama to the west, and the Dead Sea to the east. It is extremely high, and can be ascended on foot by the winding snake path or by a cable car that runs from the tourist center at the feet of Masada to the top. The top of the plateau is flat and rhomboid shaped, about 550 meter by 270 meter. There was a wall around the top of the plateau, totaling 1,300 meter long and 3.7 meter high, with many towers, and the fortress included storehouses, barracks, an armory, the palace, and cisterns that were refilled by rainwater. 3 narrow, winding paths led from below up to fortified gates. At the beginning of the Great Revolt against Rome in 68 BC, the site was conquered by a group of Jewish zealots, and Masada became their last stronghold. In 72 AD, the Romans besieged Masada and succeeded, in the spring of 73 AD, in reaching the steep fortress after constructing a huge 114-meter high ramp on its western side. The assault ramp consisted mostly of a natural spur of bedrock, and allowed the Romans to finally breach the wall of the fortress with a battering ram on April 16. According to Josephus, when Roman troops entered the fortress, they discovered that its 960 inhabitants had set all the buildings but the food storerooms ablaze, and committed mass suicide by killing each other. They chose to commit suicide, rather than to fall into the hands of the Romans alive. Their deeds left behind a saga of courage and heroism. This is the Western Palace. The original palace was accessed through an open courtyard. Visitors were led to a throne room. The dressing room also had another entrance, that connected to the courtyard through the mosaic room, that contained steps led to a second floor with separate bedrooms for the king and queen. There are 3 small palaces like these here as well. This is a round columbarium tower. This was used as a housing structure for doves and pigeons, as an observation tower, raising birds for their meat, and bird droppings which were used as a fertilizer for growing food. This used to be a mikveh, a Jewish ritual bath. According to the Jewish regulations, a mikveh must contain enough water to cover the entire body of an average-sized man. The necessary volume of water as being 40 seah, or about 150 gallons. The mikveh must be connected to a natural spring, or to a well of naturally occurring water, like rainwater. Since this mikveh was far from any natural spring, It presumably functioned as a cistern for rain, and the Masada residents immersed therein. Though stagnant rainwater could hardly have been hygienic, this mikveh would still have met the legal requirements to purify. In Judaism, ritual purity and hygiene can be two very different categories. Masada used to have 4 gates, one of them is this one, the South Gate. Monks and hermits have inhabited the mountain since the early centuries of Christianity. They lived in natural caves, which they turned into cells, chapels, and storage rooms. A sophisticated system of conduits brought rainwater from a large catchment area into 5 caves used as reservoirs. This 4th century Byzantine hermit monastery was built on the ruins, but the monks abandoned the site after the Persian invasion of 614 AD. Elaborately built, the large bathhouse probably served the guests and senior officials of Masada. It consisted of a large courtyard surrounded by porticos and several rooms, all with mosaic or tiled floors and some with frescoes walls. The largest of the rooms was the hot room or caldarium. Its suspended floor was supported by rows of low pillars, making it possible to blow hot air from the furnace outside, under the floor and through clay pipes along the walls, to heat the room to the desired temperature. A 2,000-year-old seat discovered during archaeological excavations in the early 1960s, was successfully germinated into a date plant. Imagine the quietness in the room and birds chirping, as they do today. Going from Masada to Jerusalem, the road is prone to sinkholes. I saw thousands of caves, and stopped by at the caves of Qumran. Qumran is best known as the place where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, just 65 years ago. Remains dating back to the Iron Age have been uncovered at Qumran, as well as walls, pottery, and a cistern from later settlements. Even all those years ago fresh water was an issue in this dry environment, and aqueduct systems were added to bring fresh water to the city from the greener regions of the north. Qumran was established during the Hellenistic period, 134 to 104 BC, and remained inhabited up until 68 BC. Multi-level structures, reservoirs, pottery kilns, and houses have been excavated in this era. It was during the Hellenistic period that the Essenes Jewish sect settled here, isolating themselves from big city life, and living as a communal monastery-like community. The sect is thought to have eaten communal meals, studied sacred scriptures for most of the night, taken a daily ritual bath, practiced celibacy, and they had their own calendar. From information found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, scholars have managed to get a clear picture of the community's way of life and beliefs. It is thought that about 200 people once lived here. In 1947, local Bedouins discovered a clay jar containing 7 scrolls, in a cave about 1 mile from Qumran. The ancient scrolls finally reached scholars, who could accurately evaluate the age and value of the parchments. Further exploration uncovered a total of 972 texts, including the oldest known existing copy of the Old Testament. The scrolls are believed to have belonged to the Essenes sect. Some of the scrolls describe the tenets of the sect, and their particular slant on Judaism. In all there were 12 caves, where scrolls and fragments of parchment were found. The scrolls are now housed in the Shrine of the Book at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, where they are kept at the optimal temperature and humidity conditions, to preserve them for the future. The copper scroll found in cave number 3 is on display in the Amman Museum in Jordan. While going to Jerusalem, on Highway 1, I took an exit, and paid my visit to the tomb of Prophet Moses, located near this red hill. He is also known as Nabi Musa, alayhi salam, which is one of the most holiest figures in the Quran, besides Prophet Muhammad, alayhi salam. This large walled complex includes 120 rooms, a large number of white capes above its roofs, and a high tower. The original site was constructed in 1270 AD, by the Mamluk Sultan Baybars. The sanctuary was restored and expanded in 1885, creating a total area of 50,000 square feet, enclosed by a limestone wall. The main entrance to the court is located on the west side. The entrance opens to a courtyard. Around the yard are rooms on 2 floors, and the mosque on the right side. In the center are 2 wells, which supplied water to the pilgrims. On the eastern side of the yard, the steps lead around to the entrance to the mosque. In the center of the yard, under the green painted capes, is the mosque. The minaret, or call to prayers tower, is seen behind it. The room in the center is the oldest section in the sanctuary. Inside the room is a monument, covered by a green cloth, which marks the place of the tomb of Prophet Musa, alayhi salam. If you have seen my Jordan travel video, I showed Mount Nebo as a place where, according to Jewish and Christian tradition, Nabi Musa, alayhi salam, is buried. However, there is no actual grave on that site. Ironically, Mount Nebo is only 18 miles east of this location. The Bible describes that Moses died in the land of Moab, and the Lord buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, but no man knows his sepulture unto this day. The choice of this particular location is not clear, and clearly contradicts the biblical description. However, there is a writing hanging on the wall that reads that, according to a companion of Prophet Muhammad, alayhi salam, Abu Huraira, Raziallah, this is the actual location of the tomb of Nabi Musa, alayhi salam. A large Muslim cemetery is located around the complex. On the southeast side is a single cape tomb, named Sidna Aisha, that means, Our Lady Aisha, Raziallah. She was one of the wives of Prophet Muhammad, alayhi salam. This seems a big contradiction. Lady Aisha, Raziallah, died in Medina. Her funeral prayers were led by Abu Huraira, Raziallah. Then, she was buried in Jannat al-Baqi graveyard, also in Medina. Several hundred yards south of Nabi Musa, alayhi salam, on the side of the road, is the Maqam Hassan, Ra'i. This maqam is actually a tomb. According to Muslim tradition, he was the shepherd of Jethro, or Nabi Yaqub, alayhi salam, who is buried there. Jerusalem's current walls were built under the orders of Sulayman the Magnificent, between the years 1537 and 1541. Some portions were built over the ancient walls from 2,000 years ago. The walls were built to prevent invasions from local tribes, and to discourage another crusade by Christians from Europe. They even withstood artillery fire during the War of 1948. The walls of the Old City are 40 feet high and 2.36 miles around. The Ottoman Turkish Sultan had wanted the walls to enclose the southern city of David also, but the architects failed to include Mount Zion or the city of David. As a result, Suleiman had the architects beheaded. There are 8 gates in the city walls today. There are 4 quarters within the walled Old City of Jerusalem. The Christian quarter stretches from Damascus Gate, to the north up to the New Gate, and then extending along the west wall up to Jaffa Gate. The Jewish quarter is located just west of the western wall. The Muslim quarter is the largest and most populated of the 4 quarters in the Old City. The 4th quarter is known as the Armenian quarter. The nation of Armenia was the first nation to declare itself a Christian nation. They did this in 301 AD, before the days of Constantine, but Armenians had been living in Jerusalem since 95 BC. The Armenian quarter was established on Mount Zion. Right before the Crusader period of 1099 AD, to 1187 AD, the Armenian quarter began to develop. It reached its current size during the Ottoman period of 1517 AD, to 1917 AD. Today the Armenian quarter covers about 1/6 of the Old City. The Christian quarter is bordered by the Muslim quarter and by the Armenian quarter. The Christian quarter is the most visited quarter of the Old City, because it includes the site of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The church is also known as the Church of the Resurrection to Eastern Orthodox Christians. It stands on a site that is believed to encompass both Golgotha, or Calvary, where Jesus was crucified, and the tomb or sepulchre, where he was buried. The early Christian community of Jerusalem appears to have held celebrations until the city was taken by the Romans in 66 AD. When Emperor Constantine the Great converted to Christianity in 312 AD, he commissioned numerous churches to be built, including this church. This building was severely damaged by fire in 614 AD when the Persians invaded Jerusalem. In 638 AD, the Christians were forced to surrender Jerusalem to Muslim control under Caliph Omar. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre continued to function as a Christian church under the early Muslim rulers, but on October 18, 1009 AD, the Fatimid Caliph Hakim brutally and systematically destroyed the great church. In 1048 AD, Emperor Constantine Menomachos provided money for reconstruction, subject to stringent conditions imposed by the Caliphate. The Crusaders started renovating the church in 1112 AD. In recent times, a fire during 1808 AD, and an earthquake during 1927 AD, did extensive damage. The church's chaotic history is evident in what visitors see today. Byzantine, medieval, Crusader, and modern elements mix in an odd mishmash of styles, and each governing Christian community has decorated its shrines in its own distinctive way. Oddly enough, there is Omar Mosque placed in the middle of the neighborhood. Then comes the Jewish quarter. In this quarter of the Old City of Jerusalem, you will find many holy and historical sites. As per Psalms, 122. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper that love thee. This building houses the tomb of King David. Some have come to pray and pay homage to Israel's famous king and ancestor of the Messiah, while others pore over sacred texts all day long in the anteroom next to the tomb. The tomb is covered with a velvet cloth embroidered with the words David, Melech, Israel, Hi, Vikayim, the first song many Jewish children learn, which evokes the sense that David's spirit is still with us. This synagogue church used by first-century Judeo-Christians, which became known as the Church of the Apostles. Gradually this memorial came to be accepted as David's tomb, first by the Jews, and later also by Muslims. On the right hand, Muslims also have a mosque built where they go to pay homage to Prophet David, alayhi salam. This mosque is very old and one can see the classical architecture of old times. The burnt house is believed to have been set on fire in 70 AD, during the Roman destruction of Jerusalem. Jerusalem's upper city was known for its wealth. It was located close to the temple, and inhabited by priestly families who served in the temple. When the Romans stormed the upper city, they found little resistance. Much of the population was near death from disease and starvation. At the far side of Jewish Quarter Road are the ruins of the Nia Church, only uncovered 3 decades ago. The Nia, or New in Greek, was Byzantine Jerusalem's largest and second most important church after the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So complete was the eradication of Nia, that its precise location was only discovered just recently. As I approached the Western Wall, I came upon the last remnant of Second Temple, the most sacred site in Judaism. The 187 feet of the wall that we see today is only a small part of the western restraining wall King Herod built around the Temple Mount. The western wall is actually 1,600 feet long. When the Romans destroyed the Second Temple and razed the city, one of the few things to remain was the Western Wall in Jerusalem. Jewish tradition tells us that when the temple was destroyed, all the gates of heaven were shut, but one. The only gate to remain open was the Gate of Tears. So for thousands of years, people have come to pour out their hearts and their tears at this wall. This is why you will often hear it called the Wailing Wall. Next is the Muslim Quarter, which has the main entrance through Damascus Gate. This gate is also the last bus stop, bringing passengers from the areas controlled under the Palestine Liberation Authorities, including Bethlehem, Al-Khalil. Muslim Quarter contains Masjid al-Aqsa, which is the third holiest site in Islam. There are several buildings in this compound and it, as a whole, is known as Masjid al-Aqsa, which means the farthest mosque. The name refers to a chapter of the Quran, called the Night Journey, in which it is said that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam traveled from Mecca to Masjid al-Aqsa, and then up to heaven on a heavenly creature called al-Buraq. It is considered by some to have happened just over a year before the Hijrah, on the 27th of Rajab, but this date is not always recognized. This date would correspond to the Julian date of February 26, 621 AD, or, if from the previous year, March 8, 620 AD. The mosque's interior is supported by 45 columns, 33 of which are white marble, and 12 of stone. This is also the place which is the first Qibla Muslims prayed towards, known as Al-Aqsa Mosque, or Bayt al-Maqdis. This Qibla was used for over 13 years, from 610 AD until 623 AD. 17 months after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrival in Medina, the date is given as 11 February 624. The Qibla became oriented towards the Kaaba in Makkah. The change happened very suddenly during the noon prayer in Medina, in a mosque now known as Masjid al-Qiblatain, Mosque of the Two Qiblas. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was leading the prayer, when he received revelations from Allah, instructing him to take the Kaaba as the Qibla. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who had been facing Jerusalem, upon receiving this revelation, immediately turned around to face Makkah, and those praying behind him also did so. The golden dome in the center is called the Rock Dome, built by Khalifa Omar ibn al-Khattab. May Allah be pleased with him. When he entered the city, the Dome of the Rock has a striking presence in the holy city of Jerusalem. It is located on the Temple Mount, a spot is sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. In this way, the Dome of the Rock provides a visual reminder and tangible symbol of not only the underlying unity among the Abrahamic religions, but also their discord and rivalry. The Old Jerusalem has been modernized a lot. Here, one can walk around and see the rolling hills, people walking by, historical buildings, and the beautiful scenery of the city. This sure is a beautiful and one of the oldest cities in the world. In the Hollywood movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones and his enemies try to capture the lost Ark of the Covenant. At one point in the film, Jones' nemesis pats the Ark, and turns to Indiana saying, "You and I are just passing through history. This is history." That is the feeling I got in the old city of Jerusalem. Just walking through the narrow streets and alleys, never mind the shrines holy to three faiths, one is immersed in history. On the Mount Olives in Jerusalem, at the Salman Farsi Street, this is the Maqam of Salman Farsi alayhi salam. It is said that he once lived here. Nowadays, one can see a mosque here, that is called Masjid Salman Farsi. He was one of the most famous and loyal companions of the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was also the first Persian convert to Islam. It was Salman who came up with the idea of digging a great trench around the city of Medina to defend the city and its people from the army of 10,000 enemies of Arabia. The battle is known as Jang Khandak, or the Battle of the Trench. Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, considered Salman as al-Bayt, a part of his household. On the left-hand side of the mosque, a Muslim cemetery can be seen. The Church of the Nativity is a basilica, located in Bethlehem. The holy side of the Church of the Nativity, sits atop, is known as the Grotto. It is still traditionally considered to be located over the cave that marks the birthplace of Jesus of Nazareth. This large paved courtyard in front of the church is Manger Square. Here, crowds gather on Christmas Eve to sing Christmas carols, in anticipation of the midnight services. This is the main Basilica of the Nativity. The basilica is entered through a very low door, called the Door of Humility. As I entered here, a sign read, "If you enter through these doors, you become a holy man. If you are a holy man, you become holier." This basilica is maintained by the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate of Jerusalem. It is designed like a typical Roman basilica, with 5 aisles and an apse in the eastern end, where the sanctuary is. The church features golden mosaics covering the side walls, which are now largely decayed. There is a trapdoor in the modern floor, which opens up to reveal a portion of the original mosaic floor. The church also features a complex array of lamps throughout the entire building. Stairways on either side of the sanctuary lead down by winding stairs to the grotto. The underground cave is known as the Grotto of the Nativity. It enshrines the site where Jesus of Nazareth is said to have been born. The exact spot is marked beneath an altar by a 14-pointed silver star set into the marble floor, and is surrounded by silver lamps. This altar is denomination neutral. Another altar in the grotto marks the site where traditionally Mary laid the newborn baby in the manger. The adjoining Church of St. Catherine is a Roman Catholic church. It was built in a more modern Gothic Revival style, and has since been further modernized. This is the church where the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem celebrates midnight Mass on Christmas Eve. The bas-relief of the Tree of Jesse was recently incorporated into the Church of St. Catherine as a gift of Pope Benedict XVI during his trip to the Holy Land in 2009. Measuring in at 12.3 feet by 13 feet, its corpus represents an olive tree figuring as the Tree of Jesse, displaying Christ's lineage from Abraham through Saint Joseph, along with other biblical motifs. The upper portion is dominated by a crowned figure of Christ the King in an open-armed pose, blessing the earth. Numerous chapels are found in the compound as well, including the Chapel of Saint Joseph, commemorating the angel's appearance to Joseph, commanding him to flee to Egypt, the Chapel of the Innocents, commemorating the children killed by Herod, and the Chapel of Saint Jerome, where traditionally he translated the Bible into Latin. Over the years, the compound has been expanded, and today it covers approximately 13,000 square yards. Due to its cultural and geographical history, the site holds a prominent religious significance to those of both the Christian and Muslim faiths. From there, my driver took me to the Church of Gloria, in Excelsis Deo. This church has beautiful gardens. But, unfortunately, the church was closed. From there, we were on our way to Herodion. Herodion is the location of King Herod's tomb, and one of his desert palaces. It is located 3 miles southeast of Bethlehem. The hill is 2,500 feet above sea level, the highest peak in the Judah Desert. Strangely enough, this is a man-made 200 feet hill. The site is accessible by driving up the mountain. Herod the Great governed Palestine, parts of modern Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. He is called the Great simply on the basis of his architectural achievements. The fortress was initially built between 23 to 15 BC, as a 7-story, 115 feet high structure, with walls that stood high above the natural hill. Later the external walls, facing the hillsides, were hidden behind a landfill that covered the walls from all sides. The earth was dug out from a nearby hill on the north side. The lower two floors are underground and supported by arches, while the upper floors were covered by wooden ceilings. Inside the fortress was Herod's private castle, with courtyards, rooms and bathhouses. The fortress was connected to the lower city by a straight stairway, which ascended on its northeast side. In the lower city were palace and office structures, a large Roman garden, and lake. The water to the lower city was supplied to the lake by an aqueduct from the area of Bethlehem. The water for the upper city was supplied by cisterns, built on the northeast side, and fed from rainfall. Herod the Great was greatly stirred when the Magi announced the birth of some great king in his kingdom. Thus, he ordered the slaughter of all the boys who were 2 years old and under, in Bethlehem and its vicinity. On this news, Joseph took Mary and Jesus, and fled to Egypt. He was a brutal man, who killed his father-in-law, several of his 10 wives, and 2 of his sons. Shortly before his death, Herod decided against his sons Aristobulus and Antipater, who were executed in 7 and 4 BC, causing the Emperor Augustus to joke that it was preferable to be Herod's pig than his son, a very insulting remark to any Jew. Herod reigned for 37 years, during which he built several colossal projects, including the fortress at Masada and Herodium. He died in Jericho. After his death, one of his sons, Herod Antipas, was one of the conspirators in the trial and execution of Jesus. During the Great Revolt, the Zealots captured the fortress in 66 AD. They converted a public structure to a synagogue, and added 2 mikveh, or baptismals, one near the structure, and the other near the eastern tower. They also built makeshift structures, which were dismantled during the excavations. After 4 years under siege, the rebels finally surrendered without bloodshed to the Roman army. During the Bar Kokhba revolt, 132 to 135 AD, the fortress was captured again by the freedom fighters. As part of their defense measures, they dug secret tunnels around the cisterns, and hid there. This underground network of escape tunnels is one of the highlights of the excavations. The site was deserted until the 5th century, when a large community of monks resided in the site, and constructed 4 churches in the area. After the Arab conquest in the 7th century, the site was in ruins, and the area was populated by Bedouins in recent 50 years. Herod the Great's tomb was discovered by Israeli archaeologists in 2007 on this site, that is located in a tunnel, halfway up the hill to Herodium. The tomb contained a broken sarcophagus, but no remains of a body. The lower Herodion, at the base of the mountain, consisted of numerous palace annexes, for use by the king's family and friends, and for the central offices of the district capital. It contains large Roman-style gardens surrounded by columns, with a large pool at the center of the garden. The pool was surrounded by extensive, well-tended gardens. 29 feet wide porticos, consisting of columns adorned with Ionic capitals, surrounded the gardens on 3 sides, to a length of about 800 feet. Halls, each measuring 350 by 35 feet, were built along the eastern and the western sides of the pool. It covered an area of some 38 acres. It was well planned. The buildings and gardens were placed on a north-south axis. This place is a must during your visit to Bethlehem. Hebron is called Al-Khalil by Palestinians. Rental cars are not allowed to be taken into the areas controlled under Palestine authorities. Therefore, I took a bus from Jerusalem to Hebron that dropped me at the main bazaar. I had to walk over a mile and had to go through an Israeli checkpoint to reach to Ibrahimi Mosque. This is also called Masjid al-Khalil. This place is also known as the Cave of the Patriarchs. Almost all of the outer construction, which can be seen today, was built in the 1st century BC by Herod the Great. Herod's building did not contain a roof. We can see Greek inscription on the wall, that is from King Herod era. In 637 AD, the area came under the control of the Muslims, and the building was converted to a roofed mosque. Masjid al-Khalil is built over a small cemetery, where lies the graves of 4 prophets and their wives. The 4 prophets are Abraham, or Ibrahim, alayhis salam, his son Isaac, or Ishaq, alayhis salam, his son Jacob, or Yaqub, alayhis salam, and his son Joseph, or Yusuf, alayhis salam. Some Jews believe that Adam, alayhis salam, and Eve, or Hawa, alayhis salam, are also buried here. The cemetery underneath the mosque can be viewed from the cupola, which is situated opposite the Qibla wall. The complex is generally divided into 3 rooms, each with the cenotaphs of a patriarch and his wife. The cenotaphs of the patriarchs are interchangeably referred to as tombs, but no one believes the relics of the patriarchs are enshrined in them. Cenotaphs are memorials of those buried nearby. In the center of the enclosure is a court, with the porch of 12th to 14th century, that leads to the central room, containing the cenotaphs of Abraham and Sarah. Abraham is on the west, and Sarah is on the east. Their cenotaphs were constructed in the 10th or 11th century, and modified to their present polygonal, domed shape in the 14th century. A wide door between the cenotaphs leads into the large southern room, which contains the cenotaphs of Isaac and Rebekah, the main mosque. The cenotaphs were rebuilt in the 12th century. The lovely mihrab and mimbar of the mosque are in the southeastern wall. The oculus above the mihrab and the marble paneling are of 14th century. The vaulting, piers, and capitals are survivals from the 12th century, and the upper windows are from the 12th century clerestory. Mimbar. To the right of the mimbar is a small canopy that was raised in the 12th century over the entrance to the caves. It must have been re-erected after the entrance was sealed. Across the room is a 14th century canopy next to the mosque entrance. This stands over a shaft that became the only opening to the chamber leading to the double cave below. There is currently no access to these caves. Several people were trying to use their camera lights to look inside, but nothing was visible. Under the present arrangements, Jews are restricted to entering by the southwestern side, while Muslims may only enter by the northeastern side, and are restricted to the remainder of the enclosure. Abner means father of light. He was the first cousin of the Israelite King Saul, and commander-in-chief of his army. He is buried near Abraham Mosque, 4 miles east of Hebron. Going through Israeli settlements, my taxi driver took me to Arab village of Bani Na'im. Located on top of a hill, this city is at an altitude of 3,120 feet. Here, according to a local tradition, this mosque built over a Byzantine church, contains the tomb of Prophet Lut, alayhi salam. This mosque is the center of the town. The tomb is located within rectangular mosque, with an inner court, and minaret. Prophet Lut, alayhi salam's tomb is first mentioned by Catholic scholar Saint Jerome of Jerusalem, in the 4th century CE. According to Muslim legend, Prophet Lut, alayhi salam, lived in Bani Na'im, before moving to Sodom. The shrine encasing the tomb was restored in 1410 AD, by the Mamluk Sultan Nasir al-Faraj, son of Sultan Barquq. The tombs of his daughters are on an opposite hill nearby. To the southeast of Bani Na'im, is a shrine dedicated to Prophet Lut, alayhi salam, known as Mayaqim an-Nabi Yadin, Shrine of the Truthful Prophet. Local legend claims that Prophet Lut, alayhi salam, prayed at the site, and imprints of his feet in a rock there are visible. According to Muslim legend and Catholic tradition, Bani Na'im is the place where the Prophet Abraham, alayhi salam, after the departure of the angels, saw the smoke of Sodom and Gomorrah, rising as the smoke of a furnace. From Jerusalem, on the way up north, I passed through Tel Aviv. This city is just like any other large metropolitan city with skyscrapers. After going through the city streets, I decided to stay overnight in the suburb. This town is known as Netanya. It is a beach town, and is located about 15 miles north of the center of Tel Aviv. Watching the sunset, the sunrise, the night sky full of stars, and listening to the roar of Mediterranean Ocean's waves, crashing the coastline, was very relaxing, and very much needed to boost my energy levels. In the morning, I was ready to explore north of Israel. On the way to Nazareth, from Tel Aviv, I saw this beautiful city of Haifa, located at the Mediterranean coastline. This is the third largest city of Israel, with the population of about 300,000, and is located about 60 miles north of Tel Aviv. I drove up to nearby hills to get a nice city view. Haifa is considered to be the Israeli equivalent of San Francisco because of its sloping steep streets and proximity to a bay. Located on the northern slopes of Mount Carmel, and around Haifa Bay, the city is split over 3 tiers. The lowest is the center of commerce and industry including the port of Haifa. The middle level is on the slopes of Mount Carmel and consists of older residential neighborhoods, while the upper level consists of modern neighborhoods looking over the lower tiers. Nazareth is about 16 miles from the Sea of Galilee. The major cities of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv are situated approximately 91 miles and 67 miles respectively, away from Nazareth. This is the Greek Orthodox Church of the Annunciation, also known as the Church of Saint Gabriel. In the New Testament, Nazareth is described as the childhood home of Jesus, and as such, is a center of Christian pilgrimage, with many shrines commemorating biblical events. According to the Gospel of Luke, Nazareth was the home village of Mary, alayhis salam, and also the site of the Annunciation, when Mary, alayhis salam, was told by the angel Gabriel, alayhis salam, that she would have Jesus, alayhis salam, as her son. According to the Bible, Nazareth was also the place where Jesus grew up from some point in his childhood. In this church, ancient Armenian tile work decorates the walls leading to a small recess. Modern decorative murals cover the walls and the ceilings of the overground structure, built in the 18th century. The iconostasis hides the altar from view, in keeping with Eastern Orthodox tradition. The tomb of the founder of the church can be seen along the north wall. On the wall to the east is doorway, whose entryway is blocked. The underground chapel from the medieval era containing the spring is accessed by descending 7 steps at the end of this low-vaulted cavern. The original church was constructed at the side of a spring. That was the village of Nazareth's only water supply. This is where the Virgin Mary was drawing water at the time of the Annunciation. As recently as the 20th century, they continued on underground from there, for another 440 feet, to emerge in the public fountain, known as Marie's Well. Today's Marie's Well is a non-functioning reconstruction of the original. The Basilica of the Annunciation Church is located in approximately half a mile away from the Greek Orthodox Church of the Annunciation. In Arabic, it is known as Qalisatul Bashara. According to Roman Catholic tradition, the Annunciation took place here. Inside, the lower level contains the Grotto of the Annunciation, believed by many Christians to be the remains of the original childhood home of Mary. The first shrine was probably built sometime in the middle of the 4th century, comprising an altar in the cave in which Mary had lived. A larger structure was commissioned by Emperor Constantine I, commemorating important events in Jesus Christ's life. The Church of the Annunciation was founded around the same time as the Church of the Nativity, the birthplace of Jesus, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the tomb of Jesus. The current church is a 2-story building, constructed in 1969, over the site of the old church. In Islam, Jesus is known as Prophet Isa ibn Maryam, alayhi salam. He is considered to be a messenger of God, and the Messiah in Islam, who was sent to guide the Bani Israel, or children of Israel, with the new scripture, the Injil, or the Gospel. The belief in Jesus, and all other messengers of God, is required in Islam. The Holy Quran mentions Jesus by name 25 times. It states that Jesus was born to Mary, or Maryam, alayhi salam, as the result of a miraculous event, which occurred by the decree of Allah. To aid in his ministry to the Jewish people, Jesus was given the ability to perform miracles, such as healing the blind, bringing dead people back to life, etc., all by the permission of God, rather than of his own power. According to the Holy Quran, Jesus, although appearing to have been crucified, was not killed by crucifixion, or by any other means. Instead, God raised him unto himself. Islam rejects the Trinitarian Christian view, that Jesus was God incarnate, or the Son of God, or that he ever atoned for the sins of mankind. The Quran emphasizes that Jesus was a mortal human being, who, like all other prophets, had been divinely chosen to spread God's message. Islamic texts forbid the association of partners with God, emphasizing a strict notion of monotheism. Numerous titles are given to Jesus in the Holy Quran, the most common being the Messiah. Muslims believe that Jesus will return to earth, near the Day of Judgment, to restore justice and peace. Nearby, in the heart of Nazareth, there is a small church, known as Synagogue Church. Its floor is sunken about 5 feet underground, because this church is built on the ruins of the ancient Nazareth synagogue. Here, Jesus studied and prayed. In addition, this is where, one Sabbath day, Jesus delivered his famous sermon, where he declared himself as the Messiah to his Jewish village members. Mount Precipice, or Mount of the Leap of the Lord, is located about 10 miles away from Nazareth. In Arabic, it is known as Jabal al-Aqsa. This 1,296 feet high mountain is believed by many to be the site of the rejection of Jesus, described in Luke. The people of Nazareth, not accepting Jesus as Messiah, tried to push him from the mountain, but he passed through the midst of them, and went away. During the 20th century, the mountain was used as a quarry, that is now abandoned. On 14th of May, 2009, Pope Benedict XVI gave a mass on the mountain, during his visit to Israel. 40,000 people participated in the mass. Nowadays, no one comes here, even though this hill provides a nice view of Nazareth and surroundings. I had to go north from Nazareth, but took a detour to east towards Tiberias, and drove to the Sea of Galilee. This is actually a freshwater lake. It is also the largest lake in Israel of a length of 13 miles. The lake, near the Golan Heights, is fed partly by underground springs, although its main source is the Jordan River, which flows through it from north to south. The Sea of Galilee attracts many Christian pilgrims, because, according to the New Testament, many of the miracles of Jesus occurred on its shores, including his walking on water, calming the storm, and feeding 5,000 people in Tabqa. In April 2011, Israel unveiled a 40-mile hiking trail in the Galilee, for Christian pilgrims, called the Jesus Trail. It includes a network of footpaths, roads, and bicycle paths, linking sites central to the lives of Jesus and his disciples. It ends at Capernaum on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus espoused his teachings. Here, in the village of Abu Sinan, lies the tomb of Prophet Zechariah, alayhi salam. The town is about 25 miles west of Tiberias, and just 8 miles from Nahariya, the border to Lebanon. Zechariah alayhi salam is considered a prophet in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The Holy Quran mentions only 25 prophets by name, including Zechariah alayhi salam, the father of John the Baptist, or Prophet Yahya alayhi salam. Today, Abu Sinan is home to about 10,000 persons, of which 35% are Druze. Druze come here on a regular basis, to pay respect to the Prophet Zechariah, alayhi salam. Druze are neither Muslim nor Christian. It is a monotheistic religion, and 4 prophets carry the Druze messianic message. The first 3 are the Prophet Moses, Prophet Jethro, and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. According to the faith, the 4th Prophet Hamza bin Ali was the strongest of the lot. He was the spiritual leader of Egypt for 22 years. His era was the last opportunity to join the Druze religion. After that time, you have to be born into the religion, to be a part of it. The Druze religion has its roots in Ismailism, a religio-philosophical movement, which founded the Fatimid Caliphate, in Egypt, in the 10th century. During the reign of Al-Hakim, during 996 to 1021 AD, the Druze Creed came into being, blending Islamic monotheism with Hindu influences. In addition, the Druze hold other influential people, regardless of their religion, in great esteem, as the advocates of justice and belief in one God. These include the Egyptian Akhenaton, the Greek philosophers Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and Alexander the Great. Worldwide, there are probably about 1 million Druze, living mainly in Syria and Lebanon, with 104,000 in Israel. Half a mile away, in the town of Kafr Yassif, lies the tomb of Nabi al-Qisr, alayhi salam. Al-Qisr, in Arabic, means green. It is the Muslim name given to the Prophet Elijah, while others believe that he is actually Saint George. Having said that, Muslims also believe that Saint George is still alive, and his job is to guide people who are lost. Whereas, Prophet Elijah, or Prophet Ilyas, alayhi salam, is dead. This shrine is also visited by Druze on a regular basis. To continue with Druze religion, although they recognize all three monotheistic religions, they believe that rituals and ceremonies have caused Jews, Christians, and Muslims to turn aside from pure faith. The Druze eliminated all elements of ritual and ceremony. There is no fixed daily prayers, no fasting, no defined holy days, and no pilgrimage obligations. The Druze perform their spiritual reckoning with God at all times. They consider Adam, not as the first human being, but as the first person to believe in one God. Druze are forbidden to eat pork, smoke, or drink alcohol. Since in their belief, everyone alive today is the reincarnation of someone who lived at that time, there is no reason to allow them to join today. Therefore, the Druze refrain from missionizing, and no member of another religion can become Druze. Finally, I arrived at Nahariya, the northernmost coastal city in Israel, and my final destination. About 5 miles up north is the border to Lebanon. Nahariya was founded by German Jewish immigrants in the 1930s. Construction of homes started in 1933, and the first 2 families permanently settled in Nahariya on February 10, 1935, which is now considered the official founding date of Nahariya. The town was intended to be an agricultural village, but the residents soon realized that agriculture was impractical, and chose to focus on tourism, taking advantage of the natural surroundings and beaches. Nahariya became a development town in the 1950s, after the nearby Ma'abara was integrated. The town hence became a home to many Jewish refugees from North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. During the 1990s, the city absorbed a significant number of immigrants from the former Soviet Union and Ethiopia. In the late 1990s and early 2000, Nahariya experienced a construction boom. Today, this place is considered a major beach destination.